A pretty full agenda tonight, so what I'd like to do is just kick this off and turn this meeting over to Chris Jones. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. We're pleased for Suffolk County both to be hosting tonight's event and also to be a very important and active partner in this effort that we're going to talk about this evening. My name is Chris Jones. I'm with Regional Plan Association. We are a nonprofit research and planning organization. We've been serving the greater New York, New Jersey, Connecticut region for about 90 years at this point. Sometimes it feels like I've been working there for about 90 years. But we have been active on the island in New York City, New Jersey, and Connecticut, and we're also one of the partners in the New York Connecticut Sustainable Communities Consortium, which is it's a new collaboration which includes 9 cities, the counties of Nassau and Suffolk, 6 regional planning organizations, supported by a number of state agencies, nonprofit organizations, and it's we received a grant from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. We're one of 69 regional consortiums around the country who are looking at ways to enact this program on in local areas throughout the country. So what we're going to do tonight. Purpose is 1, to provide you with information about this program, what we're about, what we're trying to accomplish, and also to hear from you. We want to get feedback on the goals of the program, what we should be prioritizing, what specific objectives, how this relates to other initiatives or local concerns. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through an overview of the regional program. And we'll go into a little bit more in depth into the projects that we're undertaking in Nassau and in Suffolk County. Then we're going to hear from a panel, which will talk specifically about some of the Suffolk study that's being undertaken on transfer of development rights, as well as the other aspects of this of this program. We'll move in from there into question and answer, and then for those of you who could stay, we're going to have some breakout sessions in the next room so we can go into greater detail on some on questions, issues, and recommendations that you might have. So, first slide. So this program really emanates from a partnership of 3 federal agencies: the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Department of Transportation, and the Environmental Protection Agency. And it was really an attempt to break down the silos between different types of planning and program that takes place on the federal level and move that down into regional and local levels. Those of you who've been involved in many of the programs, it can be frustrating when you go to one agency of government and you get one set of instructions or one set of priorities, then you go to the next one and you get a completely different set. So it's an attempt to coordinate those activities to make more livable places. And when you think about it, what makes a place livable? It's housing, it's transportation, it's the environment, it's the economy. So it doesn't make sense to plan for these places in distinct agency silos. So these 3 agencies of government are trying to develop a coordinated approach to these initiatives. They've provided some $236 million in federal funding for grants throughout the country. Next slide, please. And it's supported by, it's driven really by these 6 what they're calling livability principles, and they're really, we find, basically common sense. What makes a place livable? It's promoting transportation choices, housing choices, supporting existing communities. It's really about, both how can you support existing communities, and at the same time providing a wider array of choices, a wider array of housing choices, a wider array of economic opportunity. Next slide. This is a partnership that covers the New York Connecticut region. As I said, it involves the counties on Long Island, New York City, 4 counties in Westchester County, 4 in Connecticut, the Long Island Regional Planning Council, and 4 metropolitan planning organizations, which are regional planning organizations that both support federal transportation dollars throughout the region. So so we are teaming forces, trying to look at both regional and local issues through this grant. It's supported by several state agencies. Paul Beyer is here from the Department of State. We also have the Department of Economic Development, Homes and Community Renewal, and 4 state agencies in Connecticut, and a number of nonprofit organizations, the Urban Land Institute, local initiative support corporations, and others. Next slide. So the program of this, there are some 17 separate activities that we're pursuing here, and we're trying to pursue them simultaneously at a regional level, coordinating housing, transportation, environment, economic development. There are some 50 different regional, county master plans and other other plans that we are trying to look at. How can these be better integrated? How can we implement these in a way that that is both more efficient and that hits some of the some of the larger regional priorities. But at the same time, we're trying to make an impact on the ground through a number of local initiatives. And these specific area-wide initiatives cover, we've divided them into programs which really affect the northern part of the region, covering the Metro North territory, so moving from the Bronx along the through Westchester and the coast of Connecticut, looking at very specific downtown revitalization projects around these transit stations. So we're looking at some 1,000 acres of property in downtown areas that can be used really to drive the next generation of growth in terms of the type of mixed income housing and commercial development that could happen in these places. In the eastern sector, which really runs all the way from Brooklyn out to Montauk, we have several projects that are that we're trying to link. There's a neighborhood project in East New York on the Long Island Railroad Station in that neighborhood, and there we're looking at a comprehensive neighborhood program to provide a model that may be used in other urban neighborhoods throughout the region. In Nassau and Suffolk, as you'll be hearing later, in Nassau we're looking at some 21 stations in central Nassau for potential redevelopment opportunities. And in Suffolk, as you'll be hearing about, we're doing a study of the different transfer development rights programs, really trying to look at ways to make those more effective, to see what works, what doesn't, and how they can be better integrated. Next slide. This shows these projects are right on a map, and as you can see, the spine of these is the region's transit network. It's one of the most robust transit networks in the country. We've invested billions of dollars into it. So the idea is, how can we use that more effectively? How can we use that as both an economic driver for the region and really leverage the investments that we've made in these? Next slide. As I said, we're just getting started with this. Over the next 2.5 years, really, we will be developing the studies, getting to the recommendations. There'll be several opportunities. My name is still Chris Jones. There'll be several opportunities for input along the way. This is the first salvo with these. We're holding 8 regional town halls throughout New York and Connecticut. This is the 5th. We had one in Mineola back in December. We've had several others in New York City and Connecticut. And really, this is just the opening to get to educate on the program and get initial feedback. There will also be opportunities to weigh in on some of the local projects in Nassau and Suffolk as those proceed. And you'll hear a little bit more about those opportunities later. And we will also be forming some advisory committees to provide input on the program throughout, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a second. There is a steering committee of principals of the organizations that basically govern the program. All of those meetings are public meetings. We hold them about once a quarter, and you can get information for those on our website. Next slide. The regional advisory committees will be convened starting in April, and we're going to have 2 of these. Anyone who is interested in participate is welcome.
Could you tell us what that website is?
Sure. It's actually at the end of the, it's at the end, on the last slide we have, so we'll have it for you there. And again, these will be, or we'll have 2 advisory committees, one for Long Island, Brooklyn, and Queens, and one for, for the Bronx moving up into Westchester and Connecticut. These will be places where we will help form some of the recommendations that will go into the final plan that we'll have at the end of the process. Next slide. There is also, for those of you who may have occasion to put in for federal grant opportunities, by getting this regional grant, anyone who in this region who is putting in an application for a discretionary program right now under the Department of Housing and Urban Development, but later on under other federal agencies as well, has an opportunity to win 2 extra points, make their application more competitive, and that you can get from the website, which is right up here. If you have an opportunity to put in for any of those types of opportunities. Next slide. So, what is it that we're trying to accomplish? What are the specific needs that we're trying to address? I think obviously in this economy and in any part of the country, there's a need for more jobs, more economic activity. This is certainly a high-cost region. So one of the things to make this place more livable and more competitive, can we lower the cost of living? Can we lower the cost of doing business? Access to opportunity, access to good schools, access to job opportunities, access to fresh food. All of these, are we providing that for all of our citizens? Resilience to climate change, something that we haven't really spent a lot of time as a region focusing on. But if some of the predictions are accurate, we could be seeing as much as a 7 to 12 inch rise in sea level by 2050. Certainly, it's something that we need to prepare for. Part of what we'll be looking for.
Where are you getting that information from?
Efficient. You got to be good. And certainly efficient regulations to try to make all of this work better. Next slide. So one of the objectives: can we build more mixed-income housing and jobs around our transit network? One of the ways to improve, take advantage of the infrastructure we have, make it easier and less costly for people to get to jobs and housing opportunities, and provide some of the housing choices that we need, is to build around the transit network. We're looking at that in several places to assess the project. Next slide. So how will we measure success with this? One of the ways is we're looking, can we reduce the burden on households that pay for both housing and transportation? We know how much costly housing can be, but if you look at the amount of money that's spent on transportation, in this region, about 16% of household income goes to transportation. That's lower than most other regions in the country. Part of that is because of the transit network that we have, so that so that in certain parts of the region you don't have to rely on an automobile as frequently. And as you can see, even in areas that are close to transit, those costs are even lower. So we're trying to lower the total cost of transportation and housing for all households in the region. That's one of the measures that we'll be looking at to see how successful we'll be. Next slide. So also we'll be doing a fair housing and equity analysis as part of this program. We'll be mapping where there are concentrations of poverty in the region. Do they have access to schools? Do they have access to job opportunities? And looking at developing some strategies out of that, to make some of those links. Next slide. How we measure success? Are we building enough mixed income housing that do have access to good schools and to job opportunities? And this just shows where some of the subsidized housing in the region is now. So we'll be looking at those connections and where we might and where we need to concentrate those efforts more. Next slide. For climate change, developing climate resiliency. This is a study that the Department of New York City Planning will be doing as part of the study, but it certainly has implications for Long Island with coastline on both the Atlantic and Long Island Sound. So they will be looking at measures to make both infrastructure and building codes more resilient to storm surges, sea level rise, and the rest. They'll be working with other members of the partnership to see how those lessons can be applied to other places. Next slide. So when we're measuring success here, how many new building code design standards will we actually implement? So it's not just recommendations that would come out of the report, but how much do we actually put into statute? How much do we actually put into law to make the infrastructure and communities in this region more resilient? So getting government regulations right. We all know that we sometimes we don't always have regulatory and government systems that work in tandem. So we're trying to get that to be better coordinated, both between different silos, different departments, whether it's housing and transportation or environmental protection and economic development, and also between different levels of government, between the federal government, state, regional, and local levels of government. Next slide. So we're specifically looking at the different types of regulatory structure we have in the region. We'll be looking at how those affect the specific projects that are underway and making recommendations for how to make those more efficient and effective. Slide. And at the end of this process, we will adopt an execution plan for regional sustainable development. So it's the measure will be to the extent that all the parties that have committed to undertake this effort, plus others that we hope will join over the next 2 years, will commit to taking specific actions to get it done. And with good fortune, we will have an opportunity to implement that over the longer term. So I'm going to stop here, and we're going to hear more about the particular programs first in Nassau County with Sean Sally. He's a senior planner with the County of Nassau. And then we'll turn it over to Andy Frelling from Suffolk County to talk about the TTR program. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, I will just go through the Nassau County project. I have a few slides here to kind of give you an overview, a snapshot of how we will be participating in this regional planning grant. Okay, Nassau County will be building on the research of the Long Island Index and the county's master plan. As estimated in the 2010 Long Island Index report, it's estimated that there's nearly 8,300 acres of surface parking, vacant land, and open space surrounding over 150 Long Island Railroad stations on Long Island. In Nassau County, the majority of that grouping is attributable to surface parking, as the majority of our station areas and downtowns are largely built out. They are approaching 100 plus years old. So again, it's primarily a surface parking. In analyzing our downtowns and transit-served locations, the Nassau County Infill Redevelopment Feasibility Study seeks to create opportunities for serving the needs of our current and future population by reducing our dependency on the automobile.
You have to talk into the mic.
Sure.
Try the mic.
And try slower so you can actually hear what you're saying.
And since we already interrupted you, could you tell me what is infill development? What do they mean by infill development?
Sure. Okay. We're looking at in Nassau County. We're looking at downtowns and Long Island Railroad station areas, specifically a half-mile radius around these station areas. They're largely built out. Again, many of them are approaching 100 years old. We're looking at areas within these station areas that are that could be underutilized, that could be vacant. We're not looking in what you may call green fields or areas of predominantly single-family residential or open space.
So is this privately owned property?
So my question is, what does infill development mean? What is that?
It's
what are
building within a already developed area. It's not expanding out. It's kind of counter to sprawl.
Building up.
No. We're not talking about height. We're talking about existing development that may need to be revitalized, underutilized properties.
Like squeeze more buildings in between the buildings that are already there, knock down the buildings that are already there?
It could be a combination of that. I mean, those are all components of infill redevelopment.
But who owns the property?
You said it's mostly parking lots, so are we saying that there is going to be no place to park?
What I was just kind of giving a description of the existing conditions in our station areas, and that's predominantly retail, neighborhood business type uses, and parking.
So it's privately owned property?
It's privately or municipally owned in the case of parking.
So in other words, you're going to use the eminent domain to take it over?
Wait, guys, one question at a time for this poor man, okay? We don't want to mute me.
This is good.
Welcome to Suffolk, by the way.
Yeah, great to be here.
Welcome to America.
But just ask one at a time, that's it.
If this property belongs to individual owners, what have you right to tell them what to do with it?
Okay, that's a great question.
Will you give a fair value, market value to their homes?
That's a great question. And at this point,
Everyone has the right to do what they want to in America with their property.
absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great question. We're undertaking a planning study that will involve a robust public outreach program. We've already reached out to the municipalities, to many civic groups, the Chamber of Commerce, and we will be hosting small working group meetings, larger meetings like tonight's meeting, to discuss the planning process so that all of the stakeholders' thoughts, opinions, issues are addressed. Maybe I should step back, and this is not a county initiated study where we're looking to usurp local land use control. This is a collaborative effort that we'll be undertaking, and our outreach plan is already in motion.
It's just the
So
larger
there's no
centrally
say in
planned
what
one.
goes
Sure.
on.
Good question. If Nassau County did not have this grant money, would they be doing this?
Well, Nassau County has been working with.
It's a yes or no question. If Nassau County did not get this
Let's
grant
just
money,
say-
would they be doing this on
Taxpayer
this
money.
scale?
What I could say is the funding is helpful in doing this.
You're not
We are
answering
currently,
Let him
will
get
answer
the
your
words
question. We are currently working with, and we have been working with municipalities over the past 8 or so years in working community planning initiatives. We've worked with the town of Hempstead, the town of North Hempstead, the town of Oyster Bay, to actually come up with visioning plans along with the local residents, stakeholders, et cetera. Many of those plans are actually being implemented as we speak, whether it's rezoning legislation, other planning tools that are being implemented. So yes, again, the funding is helpful here because we may not have had enough in the county coffers to undertake this type of planning initiative. But this is not new for,
Right.
for the county.
There's always planning going on within towns, counties, and that's fine, no objection to that. But it just sounds like things are being ramped up in a direction that I'm not so sure we should be going because we have the grant money. Now, let me ask you this. What is our national debt now? $17 trillion. So not a penny of this is paid for.
That's what I'm
Okay,
amending,
and not
Joe.
only that, we're going on the premise of this global warming that I'm not so sure, okay, that it is a done deal as far as the scientific community is concerned.
And that's what you're going.
We got a program we got to get through.
Yeah, we want to hear.
It leaves about an hour for interaction.
If I could just interrupt. We definitely want to hear all of this. And there's going to be several opportunities. We'll have question and answer at the end. We're going to have breakout sessions over here. There's opportunities to, send follow-up to us at their website and other places. But we do want everybody to hear the whole program so that everybody has, all of the information, and then we can do the question and answer at the end. Thank you. All of this we're taking down. We're going to have opportunities for more questions later. So, Sean, did you have anything you wanted to finish up with this? Okay. Andy, you're up. Okay.
Good evening. It's January 31st, you might know that, but you might not know that it is the end of hunting season in Suffolk County and on Long Island. And the only reason I bring that up, number one, is because I hike in the mornings every day in the Rocky Point Preserve as part of the Pine Barrens, but number two, I'm glad you're not in the woods with me and you're not armed.
You would be safer with us than with just about anybody else, trust me.
So I'm representing Suffolk County and our little piece of this overall project. And what we're looking to do is analyze the tool of transfer of development rights here in Suffolk County. What we want to do is try and figure out how Suffolk County will accommodate growth in the future. We want to protect our drinking water, we want to protect our open space, but we still want to have sustained economic development and we still want to grow in Suffolk County. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, I don't know how well you can see that, but this was Suffolk County a long time ago. I think this is the Comac area. This is what Suffolk County looks like in 1978. You can see all the farm fields have now been developed into single-family homes. What we're trying to do in the future from this point forward is not to have this development pattern, but but to try and bring all the future development into a center node, if you will, so we can have our open space. So, and this,
What does that benefit?
so next slide. Okay. So what we're talking about is the transfer of development rights, and what it really does benefit is the property owner. Okay? What transfer of development rights does, it's a zoning tool, and what it allows the property owner to do is to sell the development potential of their property. It allows the developer to buy the development potential of your property and transfer it where he has approvals to build. That's the tool of transfer of development rights. Next slide.
Excuse me, this sounds like low-rise projects, get with it. Our
Sounds like
homes go
Marxism
and the
to me.
projects go up, except they won't be 40
Folks, can we really go through the program?
We'd
We'll have time for this.
So what we would like to do is to bring more sustainable regional growth to Suffolk County that preserves open space, that protects the natural resources, that enhances the regional economic competitiveness, and you can read this, the regional cooperation and increased transparency. Next slide. These are our objectives, the identification of available sending and receiving sites throughout the region, and we can talk about what those are. The analysis of successful and effectiveness of existing programs, and the development of policies that will help strengthen the existing TDR programs and promote better cooperation throughout the region. The tasks of our study, we were given a small amount of money to do a study, and yes, we've been working on this for a long time, so this money helps us move it along. But really what we're doing is inventorying all the existing transfer development right programs in the county. Then we're going to analyze all those programs and figure out what's working with them and what's not. And then we're going to make recommendations to the county legislature, to the county executive, to the public on how the TDR programs can work better. And this is all going to include public outreach. Tonight is Suffolk County's first public outreach meeting. Thank you for coming, and we're going to have many, many more. Next slide. Okay. So we are working on the first stage of our study. We've come up with a draft of our first piece of it, which is basically just an analysis or an inventory of what's existing in Suffolk County. You should know that transfer of development rights is a tool that's been used in zoning and land use since 1968, and we can thank New York City and the Landmarks Preservation Law. You can look that up and see the history behind that. But since 1968, this has been a zoning tool. Islip and the town of Southampton have been using transfer of development rights as a zoning tool in their code since the 70s. Now, with the 10 towns and 33 villages we have in Suffolk County, there are 14 TDR programs throughout the towns. There's 3 regional programs throughout all of Suffolk County. That makes 17 TDR programs in Suffolk County. They're all competing for the same type of sending areas, which are our farmlands, our open space areas, areas that we want to preserve with environmental constraints, and they're all going to the same type of receiving areas. Areas where there are train stations, areas where there are sewer districts and downtowns, areas that can receive that kind of development and growth. These programs are all competing for the same types of sending and receiving areas. We kind of know, after doing an analysis and working with TDR since 1968 and the 70s, we kind of know what the problems with transfer of development rights as a tool is. Number one, there's no pressing demand to utilize development rights as a tool for promoting development. Number two, it's unpredictable for the developer to know how many development rights he may need to bring into his project, and certainly there's a cost to a development right. You may know that because the development rights are attached to the U.S. Constitution and the Fifth Amendment, where no property can be taken without just compensation, that a development right in the Central Pine Barrens, if you own property and the developer wants to buy your right, he will pay you $80,000 at the moment, and at one time it was $100,000, to purchase your development potential so he can use it on a project where he has an approval. So the cost to a developer to purchase those development rights is a hindrance to him. It's a benefit to the landowner, but a hindrance to the developer. We also know that development rights are used in a very small niche in development. The Suffolk County Sanitary Code allows you to have certain densities throughout Suffolk County. The TDR program only allows you to double that density without causing environmental impacts to the groundwater. Once you bring in sewers, once you bring in a sewage treatment plant on site, TDRs no longer work. There's no need to bring in TDRs. But there are benefits. TDRs is another zoning tool that governments can use for open space preservation. The public cost for TDRs is zero because a developer buys the development potential from the landowner and transfers that to his project. So there is no public cost to the TDR.
Excuse me, could I just ask a quick question? Because if a developer buys the development rights for a piece of land in the Pine Barrens, what you're talking about is then he would transfer that right to another, he's not going to be actually developing that piece of land, he's going to be
That's
developing.
correct.
Okay, all right, I just want to make sure I understood
Right,
what
now
you
he's
meant.
transferring off your piece that you just sold,
gotcha.
the development potential, to his project
Okay.
somewhere else. Okay. And the last benefit is that there is a TDR can provide a rationale for economic development. We're preserving here, we're developing there. It's an economic development tool, and we can use that for preserving open space and developing where we have the infrastructure to develop. So our proposal, once we're done with our report, this is only our first piece, and we've just inventoried everything. Now we're going to analyze everything and test the hypotheses that I just threw out to you. But our proposal in the end is going to have a cost-effective TDR program. It's going to be predictable in process, so developers and speculators know what they're getting into from the word go. And it's going to allow economic development through TDR into our transit-oriented development zones. So that's our program in a nutshell. That's what we're thinking about. Thank you for letting me get off with a few slings and arrows. And I'll be happy to answer questions when Chris says we can do the question and answer.
After the panel.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Hi, folks. First of all, my name is Jerry Bogas. I'm with the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council, and I'm supposed to moderate this panel, but I also want to start by reflecting some of the things you've said already. Okay. So here's some of the major things we've heard, and I'm going to ask the panel to maybe think about these and talk to them a little bit. First of all, there was a concern about private property rights in this whole approach to regional planning and also place-based planning. There was a question back here about who benefits from things like transfer of development rights and the types of things that were discussed in the presentations. There was an issue here, hi Chris, about political barriers. Right. Good. How are you? And there were issues of cost that you raised, actually.
Can you just tell us what the New York State Transportation Council
The New York Metropolitan Transportation Council is a regional council of governments. It's the metropolitan planning organization for New York City, for Long Island, and for the Lower Hudson Valley.
Are you a government entity, or are you?
We're a regional council, so we're made up of governments. We're a council of governments.
Different
suburban
governments
counties,
together.
New York City, MTA.
Are you appointed, elected? How
Well, our principals are all elected. They're all county executives. I'm sorry, I checked that. Mayor Bloomberg is represented by 2 of his commissioners. And the governor is represented by the transportation commissioner. So ultimately, the top people are all elected. So we're a regional council. Explain that, but I wanted to get into the panel. So these are 4 of the issues that I've heard you raise so far, okay, and I'm sure there are others. But I wanted to ask the panel members, we have Michael Kelly from the Long Island Builders Institute, Adrian Esposito from the Citizens Campaign for the Environment, and Paul Byer from the New York State Department of State. Thinking about what they've said, thinking about these 4 issues, just give me some impressions of that, and then we'll get into a discussion with everyone who's here. Let me start with Michael. I'm going to pass you the microphone.
Thanks very much. Several topics here, and I think some of the underlying issues really go to what we're all trying to accomplish, which is to make Long Island a better and more sustainable community. And how do we do that? How do we create economic growth while preserving property rights and ensuring property rights are upheld? And how do we create that downtown development? How do we take advantage of developing around railroad stations to create transit-oriented developments? Transit-oriented developments, we could explain that in a little bit too.
Everybody buy a train station.
Well, I'll get into that a little bit. Well, thank you very much. So really what we need to do is several things. One, we talked about transferring development rights to these transit-oriented hubs, right? How do we do that? One is the programs that Andy's inventorying right now is to preserve open space. The goal of that is to preserve open space. Suffolk County is one of the largest agricultural counties in the state. So we want to preserve that. That's an economic engine for us here on the island. How do we create the economic development to revitalize and redevelop these villages that have these train stations? How do we redevelop the areas around these train stations? I don't know, 150 train stations was, I believe, the number that I heard. The amount of acreage that's around that in various parking, just surface parking, it's thousands and thousands of acres. How do we create something that becomes an economic engine around that so that we can avoid what's known as the brain drain, right? That's another component that we're trying to study, analyze, and try to avoid, this brain drain. How do we keep our young people here?
Taxes are crazy, no other reason.
Brain drain, yes.
Lower the taxes, people will stay.
Exactly. How do we do that? That's all part of this
Stop
discussion.
spending our money that we
That's
don't
all
have.
part of the discussion. You are so right. So what we have to do first is really get an incentive on how to redevelop a lot of our areas which are located around train stations. And what's the incentive? And how do you do that? One is developing the transfer development rights programs. The other is to create sewers, right? In order to develop in certain areas, a developer needs certain amount of return, right? In order to create that return, we need density, which are number of homes per acre, right?
Nice.
Those are all very big components in redeveloping blighted areas.
Blighted, another nice code.
Somebody's making money, that's right.
Yeah, and it ain't us.
Well,
And we don't want it.
Please let him say
So sewer is a major component along with the development right program to help revitalize Long Island, to make it more sustainable, to make it more affordable so that we can all afford to live here. Some of the other components in making this program work is we have to relook at our zoning codes. Right now, we don't really have multifamily zoning codes that allow us to build around these train stations. That's another component that we need to look at.
Residents don't want it.
If we wanted it,
Well-
we would have lived, I lived in Queens. I didn't want it, I wanted land. And that's why I chose, as an individual, as an American, where I want to live. Individual rights to own property.
Correct.
As much or as little as you want.
And that's why the zoning's for their protection.
Hold on, one at a time, one at a time.
If you have,
And I would like to live here in Suffolk County too, and I can't do so with a $400,000.
Having grown up in, thank you very much.
I had 3 jobs to live here.
Okay, okay.
The violin out for you.
Listen, we all live here, and we all love where we live. And what we're trying to do is to make sure that we can all afford to be here. And what we're trying to do is ensure... Slow down.
There will be time for you to say this, okay? Please let him
So what
finish.
we're trying to do is to figure out how we can develop around these train stations. One is we have to look at our zoning codes. 2, we have to create an incentive so that developers can go out and buy these development rights, preserving areas out in the farmland to make sure that they're preserved. We have to focus on sewers. We also have to focus on height. I grew up in Queens too. I loved it. And you know what? There were tall buildings there, more than 35 feet tall.
And that's your choice.
That's your choice.
Exactly. And then process. Right now, it's so difficult. It is so difficult to redevelop something here on Long Island.
Good.
Well, not necessarily for a reason. You may believe it's a reason, but it's an obstacle as well. And
To who?
To your
to who?
agenda.
The building union. That's right.
Right, so to all those people, it's very difficult. So there's many aspects that we have to look at. It's obviously, discussion is good because we get to hear these things so that we can explain things and educate everyone involved in the process. We mentioned stakeholders, right? We're all stakeholders here because we're all living here. So with that, I'll pass it over to Adrian.
My name is Adrian Esposito. I'm the Executive Director of Citizens Campaign for the Environment. We're a bi-state environmental group in Connecticut and New York. I want to add one more factor. You saw on the slideshow earlier, what does it take to be a sustainable community? You saw good schools, you saw, reasonable housing costs, you saw a number of different factors, good economy, available jobs. For goodness sakes. All right, so there was a number of criteria listed on what constitutes and what defines sustainable communities. But we would add one more, which I hope you would agree. And the one more that we would add would be clean drinking water. We all want clean drinking water.
Let her speak. Come on, let her speak.
Honey, if you think you have clean drinking water, you need to come eat with me, all right? Because we need clean drinking water. We also need open and safe beaches that don't have bacteria. We need a livable environment that is healthy for us and for our children. That's a fact, and no matter who you are, what the economic status is, what your political beliefs are, it is a common ground. So for us on Long Island, you may or may not know, but 100% of that drinking water comes from underground. So all land activities have some impact and some effect on the quality and the quantity of that drinking water. That's a fact. We are known, as the federal government has designated us, as a sole source aquifer. That means 100% of the water we all drink and we all share comes from directly underneath our feet. And that's why some of the photos or slides that Andy was showing, for instance, are key. So I just want you to be mindful of the fact as we pave over Long Island, particularly in Nassau and Western Suffolk, and as we develop, we are, in fact, diminishing the quality and the quantity of that drinking water source. So in order for us to be sustainable as an island, we need to have clean and good quality and good quantity of water for now and in the future. We don't have some place to go. We can't go to New York City. We can't go to Connecticut. There's no infrastructure. And New York City wouldn't give us their water anyway. They get it from upstate and they have, their own problems with the watershed there. So with the idea of clean water, the reason I wanted to raise that was to pick up on the theme that Mike said, which is sewers. Mike and I don't agree on much. But we do agree, and I mean that nicely. We're okay. But we do agree on the fact that sewer infrastructure is one component of clean drinking water. What do I mean by that? Well, let's just look at the village of Patchogue. The village of Patchogue went through kind of I guess I would call it a renaissance over the last 10 years. They put up some condo complexes. They have different types of housing. They did it around the train station. The village has come back. Main Street is now occupied with businesses that actually you have to wait online to go to to go to a restaurant. It's really kind of nice. It really did. It kind of came back. But also, Patchogue had a sewer system. They have a sewer treatment plant, which they updated not only in the amount of effluent it could treat, but in the level of quality. So even though more is going into that river, it is cleaner water, therefore impacting less. Then if you look at a place like Mastic Beach, the incorporated village, they have 6 miles of shoreline that is undeveloped, and they're thinking about developing it. Hotels, motels, marinas, but they don't have a sewage system. What will happen with that wastewater? It'll be put in septic tanks, it'll go right out into the bay, and they'll be degrading the very thing that they're hoping to build around. People go to hotels and motels and have marinas and boats on the water because of the water quality. And so as we fill that water up with bacteria and harmful algal blooms happen, then we degrade the very thing that we really love, which is living by the water, many of us. Many of us stay on Long Island because we do love access to Long Island Sound, South Shore Estuary, Peconic, and to the ocean waters. We love that. And so we need to protect what it is we love about where we live. So for us, it is about putting sewers in the right places, at the right time, with the right treatment ability. So if you want and need to grow downtowns and have transit-oriented development or whatever, they meaning the powers that be decide on, for us, we want them also to work backwards, and we need them to work backwards from the mandate of clean water. And the last thing I'm going to say, and some people say we already have clean water, and I want you to know our aquifer is degrading. I'm not saying that to be alarmist. I'm not saying that because I want to bring you bad news. I'd actually like to bring you good news. But the fact of the matter is, all of the science, and I have read every report that has come out in the last 5 years, every single one. The Suffolk County report, the DEC's reports, the Health Department reports, everyone. And every one of those consistently say that there are more volatile organic chemicals in the groundwater. There are more pharmaceutical drugs in groundwater. There are more household hazardous waste, more pesticides, more nitrates. That's not good for us. We need to be mindful of impacting that drinking water as we move along in a process of what we want Long Island to be in the future and what it is today. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian.
Paul, and then we'll get into the discussion.
Yeah, Paul Byer, Director of Smart Growth, New York State Department of State. Please save your applause to the end. And let me state this up front. I drove 4 hours to get here today, and I sat in traffic in Queens, and I just found out I only have 5 minutes to talk. Please excuse me, but I'm going to talk for 5 minutes, and then I'll listen to everything you have to say. I love the discussion about property rights. Americans have been doing it for 400 years. It's one of the great all-time debates in world history, but just give me a couple of minutes here. Here's what I like about the transfer of development rights. The New York State Economic Development Council, there are a bunch of economic development professionals from throughout the state, did a report about 4 years ago. Not a report, a survey. They went to actual business owners all over the country and said, what do you look for in a community when you're looking to relocate or locate or start a business? And they said the usual things that you all probably could recite. Taxes, good schools, a workforce. But right there at number 4 was quality of life, livability. And the two things that these are businesses speaking, not me the smart growth advocate or Adrian the water advocate. These are business owners saying that they looked for two things in communities. One, vibrant downtowns. Lively downtowns, economically vibrant, but also vibrant with people and parks and shops and all those things, and an abundance of open space and farmland. That's exactly what the formula for smart growth is, but more specifically, it's exactly what the formula is for the transfer of development rights. It forces us to think strategically. We're not just preserving any old piece of land for the heck of it. We can't do that anymore, and I never wanted to do that. We're strategically choosing land that probably would not turn a profit for the landowner, at least in the short term anyway. We're pairing that up with areas that should be redeveloped but aren't for many reasons. And we're joining rural and urban areas together, thinking regionally, thinking strategically, targeting growth to where, by the way, those communities have chosen to target growth. This is a bottom-up, market-driven process. TDR is another word for a development bank. It's often referred to, development right bank, because it's a market-driven process that holds development rights and sells them. A lot of people make a lot of money on the transfer of development rights. Growth happens where it would not normally happen, and growth doesn't happen where we want to protect the groundwater or natural resources. It's good for jobs, it's good for fiscal management, it's good for the environment, and it's good for people. It's good socially. Thank you very much for listening. I'll answer any question you have now.
Hi, how are you? Just in case, I know a lot of this comes out of the Smart Growth legislative guide that has been given to all the towns in how to develop for smart growth. I don't know if you guys know the origins of that, but that came down through ICLEI, which is a UN, which came from Agenda 21. Just so you know, just in case you're not aware of it. But one of the things that I'm very concerned with is in Huntington, we have the Huntington Station Revitalization Project, right? They also tried to do the transit-oriented district with the high-density housing with Avalon Bay. They got a less density. The problem was, in Huntington Station, they've already seized 3 properties by eminent domain. One for a community garden, which they already had 3 slots of land. They could have done an L-shaped community garden, but they didn't. And so you had an unwilling person that they paid below market value for a garden. Historically, as per the Constitution of the United States, that's not the proper way to use eminent domain. The other one they did is take a private property that they called blighted, took it from a private person, and are giving it to a private developer for the mixed use because it fits in the Huntington Station. I am not necessarily against people taking their private properties and deciding to use it in a way that's going to put more density or as long as it's within zoning. If they want to do that, that's their private right to do that. But this is taking private property from somebody who didn't want to sell it and giving it to another private entity. And the private-public partnerships are a whole nother thing, too. And then they took another property by eminent domain where it was a bunch of garbage on property. And the property owner took $1 million, paid $1 million for it. They took it by eminent domain and gave him $325,000 or $350,000 for it. And now, all of a sudden, they're saying there's something that's wrong with it and it's going to cost $16 million. But they still won't give it back to the person who still wants their property back. And I mean, here you just had somebody buy it. Also, another thing that I have a problem with is also in this Huntington Station revitalization zone, you also, I'm not positive because I was reading a lot of the Growing Smart guidebook, because I'm trying to be well informed and I'm trying not to debate things that are necessarily good for the drinking water, all right, or something like that. But this is the private property right. We have the planned unit development, which I believe Huntington Station falls under. I haven't had confirmation on that. But it seems like if you have a business that's in the development zone that doesn't quite meet the criteria of what they want, like a auto repair shop, there's no place for that in Huntington Station. That's considering a non-conforming use of the land in the district. Well, in the Growing Smart guidebook, it says that if it's vacant for 6 months or more, that they can take that property because it's not being used. Also, if it's not being, for some reason more than half of the property gets destroyed or is in disarray, then you can seize that property and it can't be used for an auto repair shop anymore because it's a non-conforming entity. And it would have to be something that conforms with it. That's taking somebody's private property and telling them that they had a business that was viable, whatever, I'm sorry. And then they can't use their private property the way they want to use their private property when it was zoned for the use in which they did it.
Okay.
And if a natural disaster, they can't put the same thing.
Okay.
Now, I do want to ask, could we say something, could you say something, Andy, about transfer development? There's a lot of concern here about eminent domain and private property rights. Could you put something about the transfer development rights in that context? How does eminent domain and private property rights fall into that?
Well, let me just state for the record, I don't know the specifics of what we're talking, what the cases that you're talking about, so I don't want to speak specifically to those cases. But it's hard to say. You can, I think you can imagine a logical situation where eminent domain may be reasonable, and where the government, instead of wanting to buy the whole property, would offer the the landowner, the value of the development potential of his property, and still leave him with the title, still leave him with other uses for the property. When we build highways, sometimes it's necessary to take land to widen a highway. You may have that piece of property and you don't like the fact that the public is going to take that property through eminent domain, but sometimes there are rational reasons for
yeah, that's public.
eminent domain. Having said that, landowners have a right to develop their property. That's true. They have a right to a reasonable return of their property. That's in our Constitution. But also, we all as the public have an obligation to protect the health, safety, and welfare of everybody else. So that's the government's function. We can't let you put a slaughterhouse on your property if it's going to affect people next door. So we must have zoning. So, getting back to the eminent domain, I can't speak specifically to those questions and to those specific instances, but I think a reasonable person can understand that eminent domain can be used rationally. If economic development is not a rational way to use eminent domain, then that has to be ironed out through the process.
Let me go over here because for a second.
Yeah, I just had a question regarding what you're talking about in Nassau County. You keep talking about these however many thousands of acres of parking lots near train stations. Those of us that live in these communities, where are we going to park? Is that the plan? I mean, you're just gonna put high rises there and then guess what? You can't park anymore, so go figure something else out.
Okay. The purpose of that slide was to give just a quick snapshot of what the Long Island Index analyzed. And they analyzed existing downtown areas and what they constituted as potentially redevelopable. Open space, vacant land, and surface parking. Further in my presentation, you will see, you would have seen, that we're just using that as kind of a, as a snapshot of existing conditions. We're looking to go into each one of these communities and actually look at what the land use mix is. What is the prevailing mix, height, type of uses. Talk with the business owners, with the residents. Again, the Long Island Index study was just kind of a baseline model. We were going to do a more in-depth site analysis as part of the planning project.
Well, if you don't mind, I mean, you still keep talking about these parking lots, and we do understand that that's not even our land. The MTA probably owns it, okay? So somebody's going to turn around and decide, well, no more parking lots anymore, right? What do the rest of us do? Doesn't that change the nature of our whole communities? People who are right now maybe a mile or 2 miles from the train station and work in the city every day, like my wife?
Well, that's right. The idea here is just to eliminate that part.
Exactly. That's correct. There's nothing in the scope of work that is geared towards eliminating surface parking that is desperately needed by commuters at these rail stations, by the patrons of the retail establishments, of the restaurants in the evening. We're not looking at surface parking as, let's remove this, let's redevelop. This is let's look at the type of land uses we have. Are there underutilized areas? Is there better parking management strategies that we could implement? Some of the villages in Nassau County, I can pick out Farmingdale, they've looked at a underutilized parking area. That came about based on resident input, speaking with the MTA, the Long Island Railroad, and the outcome is a potential redevelopment of that parking lot. But that's just a single case in a single community with community input and collaboration. This is not a direction that we're going in. That's not the intent of this study.
Let me just take it down here and let's go over here.
Okay, people get elected and people have platforms. They call themselves environmentalists and preservationists. Gets you elected, gets you into a position, gets you the ability to speak publicly. Well, I'm a preservationist and environmentalist, but I'll never get elected because I don't get out and prostitute myself that way. We're talking about sewers. Are they coming in or are they taking it out? We're reading about articles processing hydrofracking wastewater in Long Island sewers as a potential. Hold on a second. And Adrian, you're nodding your head, but Brookhaven was processing New York City sewer sludge. Where were you? You missed it.
Hold on, buckaroo. What do you think organized the whole thing? Stop it.
Okay, when all of this started, everybody heard Mr. Alexander say, be careful of the NIMBYs, you have to protect them. They protected the neighborhood. Okay, you can speak afterwards. But the NIMBYs are all here. We're upset about a lot of things. Everyone says they're preserving and saving. All you want to do is bring more people here. You want to cut down trees. You want to continue to develop. The Article 14 of the Constitution is for preserving land. There's nothing there about a TDR. That was invented to continue to develop what we want to say. Throw the TDR concept out. It's a game of sleight. And I don't want to play cards with these people anymore.
No, wait, we have to respond. Hello?
Okay.
Wait, I'd like to respond to the question. Let me just respond real quick. Well, to the statement. Thank you for clarifying. But thank you for raising that. I do appreciate it. But I do want to clarify with you because I do think it warrants some clarification. The reason I'm shaking my head is I do want you to know I worked really closely, and you can ask anybody in that community who helped them get the DEC to pull the permit for Brookhaven Town. That was me. I put in, I'm not self-grandizing, it was a lot of work and a lot of hours and a lot of effort. So I just do want you to know that. and we do care, and that was an atrocity. You're absolutely right, and we're very happy that that will no longer happen. No sewage sludge will go to that landfill now, because as a result of that misstep by the town, all sewage sludge will not be accepted at the landfill. So we think that was a good step for the community. I know it was. But I also want you to know about the hydrofracking issue. We're fighting hydrofracking in Albany and on a statewide level. You're right, there have been 5 sewage.
Why?
Because, well, that's another whole thing, but I want to speak to the sewage. There are 5 sewage treatment facilities on Long Island on the list. It's a very long list of sewage treatment facilities across the state of New York, but 5 have been named on Long Island that could potentially be used for that hydrofracking waste product. Those are sewage treatment plants that have a pre-industrial treatment component to them. 2 of them discharge to the ocean, 3 discharge to embayments, Long Island Sound, 2, and 1 to the Western Bays in Nassau County. That would be problematic to the bays in particular because it will have very high brine, very high volatile organic chemicals, and radionuclides. And I don't think we want to swim in those things. So I just wanted to provide some clarity. You're saying, are the sewers coming in or going out? There are some areas where we need to put them in, like Mastic and Shirley, where all of those septic tanks are draining into the Forge River, and the Forge River is a nightmare. I mean, people who live there can't go out sometimes in the summer. So there's some places...
Sewage coming here for processing.
Oh, I thought you meant are the sewer systems going in or coming out?
I hope there's no more coming in.
Well, there could be some more coming in.
Increase the capacity to bring more in for processing here.
Right, that's different. Okay, I misunderstood your question. So as far as I know, though, most facilities are at or near their capacity, and they're not really looking to bring more in because they want more development on the island. But that could be a longer discussion, and that's a good question.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I think you folks have good intentions, but there's an agenda attached to this whole thing that is not good. You know, a basic tenet of democracy is the ownership of private property. It's that simple. That's a basic tenet. And it looks like this is going out the window here with this project. Now, a couple of things. I think, is it Chris Jones? Is that your name, sir? Yeah. You talked about one of the goals, lowering transportation costs. With the MTA, the bridge and tunnel tolls, Amtrak, you've got to be kidding me. The pensions, what are you going to do about the pensions for these people? And the unions? What are we going to do? It's a black hole. Excuse me, just one other quick, I'll be very brief. You talked, and the gentleman from Nassau County that drove, whatever that was, a gentleman from Nassau County creating new high-value jobs. The way the government creates jobs is to get out of the way.
Yeah.
That's how you do it. But transfer of property rights and development rights, one of the gentlemen was talking about the benefits of a landowner. He could celebrate his property or sell his rights for $80,000. How about if he just sells it himself without you folks helping him along? This is really a bad idea, folks. Sorry, I'm not a great speaker, but this is a bad idea. Thanks very much.
But then they won't have control over it.
My name is Matt Harris. I'm saying no to Avalon Bay. I was part of a group that actually was able to get the Avalon Bay project knocked down to town codes. They tried to put in 20 units per acre, and we were able to force them down to 14, which is still too dense for my community, but it is what it is. I'm not going to talk about property rights. That seems to be a big subject here. I'm more concerned with the cost of living on Long Island. One of the biggest costs of living on Long Island, as everybody in this room probably knows, is the cost of education. 63% of my tax bill pays my school taxes. My total tax bill is 63% to the schools. When you talk about transit-oriented development and a lot of these high-density projects, does anyone even give a thought to how this impacts the school districts, the amount of children that's going to be coming out of these high-density projects, and how we're going to deal with this now with a 2% tax cap?
I thought about that. Any thoughts?
Yeah, they're going to get rid of the tax cap.
Let's just ask about that. So the issue of education and TOD?
For the most part, when you talk about multifamily or higher density, bigger buildings, they use less resources, like road infrastructure, school resources,
They don't use less school
than
resources.
sprawling development per land and per household. For example, here's when I first started in smart growth upstate, all we wanted to do was locate some higher density senior housing. And this exact issue came up. And we had to say to people, these are people that don't have kids. Oh, they're paying more into the system in taxes than they are using. It's a net benefit for the town. Most multi-unit developments have less kids than your sprawling, typical conventional sprawling neighborhood.
Not in Huntington.
Well, no, not all of them. You're right, no, not all of them. Not all of them. But most of them end up, most multifamily developments, if you concentrate them densely around rail stations, do not use as much services compared to what they pay into the system. So it's more, you're more likely to get a net profit out of that type of development than building 1 acre lots covering 50 acres of land. That's just the truth.
Just to follow up on that, the Long Island Housing Partnership recently did a study, I believe it came out last year or the year before, which actually documented each one of the multifamily, multi-unit communities that have been built on Long Island, so it's actual numbers.
I have that chart, and if you read it, you'll see that there's an apartment complex around the corner from me that's got 100 units and 114 children in it.
Okay, well, on average, if you let me finish, on average, it's less than 1 child per unit.
Doesn't work in Huntington.
I'm just letting you know what the average is, and it's actual numbers. So there is a multiple, and the net benefit, as Mr. Bear said, the net benefit inures to the school district. So that's another thing that we have to look at. Thank you.
Go back over here and then come back around, okay?
Thank you. I'm Graham Kirby. I'm somewhat flabbergasted at the boondoggle I'm seeing. Planning failed in the Soviet Union. They've been trying to develop upstate New York, particularly Buffalo, with no success for decades. I'm not convinced that a bunch of bureaucrats are going to develop jobs and communities. I think one of the last planning extravaganzas was developing high-rise communities for the poor, which ended with them being blown up and knocked down. Why should I think you'll be any more successful this time around? I mean, what is your experience of running a business, developing real estate? I'm just flabbergasted. And if you want to help Long Islanders, you don't need competition, competitive, more choices in transit. What we need is more roads, better roads. And if you want to do something, you could turn the Long Island Railroad into another highway. It's a great it's only massively underutilized. It's only used heavily in the morning and the evening. If you don't like cars, run buses on it. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Terry, and Andrea, is it? Adrian, excuse me.
Close enough.
Adrian, I don't think, first of all, I appreciate any work that you've done to improve the environment. I don't think anyone here would have any objection whatsoever to clean beaches, clean drinking water, clean groundwater, clean places for kids to play. But, I mean, could there not be simpler resolutions? Could you not upgrade the sewer system? Could you, I mean, do you have to build, with all due respect, gulags where people are going to be living? And I use that word, it's not a nice word, but I use it because, to be quite honest, a lot of people know what ICLEI is and where they're going. Thank you.
Right. ICLEI.
What are your qualifications to be entrepreneurs?
But she has a question. Doesn't she get an answer? I just want to say yes. Where'd she go? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yes, you're right, we should be, and I 100% agree with that. We believe in fix it first, which means you should fix the existing infrastructure first, like upgrade the existing sewage treatment plants, particularly in areas like Bay Park, and other areas, so in Northport Village, for instance. So yes, those infrastructure need to be repaired first and upgraded with new technology, because they discharge.
That was the bulk of your talk. Right.
Yes, I totally agree with that, yes.
Okay, but do we have to do this, take away people's homes? Do we have to build high density? Do we have to take away parking lots? Because really, isn't the object of this down the road to discourage commuting? Isn't that what this is all about?
We're not, my organization is not a governmental group. We're not here to promote anything in particular right now. We don't even know what's
part of this operation.
No, I'm here to answer questions about the environment and how we should integrate environment in protecting it into our future.
And I know sustainable is all the rage, and it's a valued input, it's a valuable direction to go. But the euphemisms that are used to take away people's freedom and rights in the Constitution.
That's right. I actually have to step in here for a second as the moderator and say, I don't know where you heard those things. We haven't said anything about taking away anybody's.
It's the blueprint that you're following.
Yes, do your own research.
It's the blueprint you're following, sir.
Right there. Moderator.
I'd like to talk to what we're proposing here, not other things. Okay?
Well, no, this
So
is all connected. With all due respect.
Yes.
Look at the organizations that are behind this New York CT Sustainable Growth entity, okay? And then you could come to your own conclusion.
Excuse me, those organizations are Suffolk County and Nassau County.
Right, yeah. Some of them,
And where are all the grants?
The regional planning councils are all represented by the people that you elect. Okay, the people that you elect. There were no nonprofits except for the Regional Plan Association in this consortium. So please, let's get the facts straight. ICLEI is not part of the consortium. ICLEI is not part of the consortium. Okay, so you can look on the website and show me where ICLEI is listed as part of the consortium. I'd love to be able to see that.
You're going to moderate.
We have somebody right back here,
Don't
please.
make statements without a repercussion. Stop, I won't stop.
I'd like to thank everyone for sharing their reality. I'd like to share my reality. And my reality is that in 1978, my parents bought their house for $24,500. Today, that house can be listed for over $290,000.
Yeah.
So in a very short time, my parents' house home value has increased tenfold.
Thank the Fed.
I am a college graduate, like most parents probably want for their children. I went to a prestigious university called Rochester Institute of Technology. I graduated with a bachelor's degree. I am $80,000 in debt today because of that prestigious degree, with all of the financial aid. And I wanted to come back to Long Island. I wanted to come back and live here. I live here today, 8 years after I went through those doors. But it becomes increasingly hard. Forget property tax, when I can't even afford a $400,000 house. Can't even get there, okay? But what I see, okay? But what I see is a potential in some of these developments, okay, for either the governments to work with young individuals to continue to provide subsidies like they have done in several instances in several high-density developments, okay? And we need a systemic change to understand that at one point, we need people like myself. You're going to need a younger generation to continue the prosperity that you all have laid down since the 50s, since Levittown.
Forget it, they already spent it.
You're going to need people to continue that. And they will not be able to continue that when industry cannot come to your neighborhood because of NIMBY, and now your taxes are $8,000, $10,000, $12,000 because there's no one paying those school taxes, and now no one wants to send their kids to those schools. And now we don't have a Suffolk County, which I can call home in about 15 to 20 years. So think about the future. Think about where think about the environment that we're setting for ourselves and what it's ultimately going to create if we don't put the changes in
and sensibility. My name is Elaine Call. I welcome you all here. I've been working on this problem for 6 years in my community. I'm from the beautiful East End of Southampton, where people come to vacation. Okay, I am very disturbed about this revitalization program and the effects it's going to have within our East End of Long Island. We do have young couples that move out into our communities. They are the children of the original parents in our communities. They both work, they have children in school, and they are buying in our communities, which we're very proud of. We do not need revitalization. We do not want sprawl. We do not want tall buildings. I must share with you, I left New Hyde Park because of sewer districts, I'm sorry. I left Farmingdale, which was farmland, pickle factory, everybody remembers that, okay? Sewers, wide roads, density built out because the planning commission came in and changed our whole quality of life. So we went out to further to Southampton, and my husband said to me, Elaine, you can't go any further. The water is out there, and there's no garbage out there or sprawl. But I hasten to caution all of you with your very wonderful suggestions this evening in revitalizing our Suffolk County. I would say go forward softly. We are very private people. I expressed myself the other night. We care about our communities. We believe in the environment. We believe in learning about sustainability. Don't take away our rights for a say in our communities. What we want and what we need is not necessarily what you're going to deliver. Thank you. Yay!
Gary? Yeah, I said earlier that
Panel discussion, what do you have us here for?
Well, I think it's feedback. I was being truthful earlier when I said I love to talk about property rights because it really, it's such an interesting, it's something that we face every day. But it works both ways. If the market, there's a market out there right now, and any private marketeer, the most pure market individual you can find in the development community, they all are in concert now in saying that in a place like Long Island, you do need targeted density. Because you got to provide places for my parents, the older population. You got to provide places for our kids. My kids can't afford to live on Long Island. So if the market is telling you that you need a certain amount of certain density, certain amount of smaller homes, townhomes, condos, and you're saying we don't want density on Long Island, you are invading on somebody else's property rights. You're telling a landowner who's coming to the town and saying, the market is saying to me, they will buy these homes and I will make a profit. And you're saying, well, you're invading on my property rights while you're invading on their property rights. It's all a balance.
Doesn't make any sense. It's a lame argument.
You're telling a private landowner they can't do what the market is asking them to do.
There was zoning to begin with.
Hey, hold on. Relax, 1 second.
Just my opinion.
Everybody's
throwing that out there for county conversation.
Dialogue. Relax.
Okay, I just want to answer, and I'm so sorry, I don't remember who raised this because we weren't allowed to speak, but somebody earlier said, look, you should have looked at COMAC even past 1978, and look, it was you, okay, I'm sorry. And look what happened, you know, we went from being beautiful farmland to this haphazard development, and I think, and I don't want to put words in Andy's mouth because he's perfectly capable of speaking for himself, but I think that was the point, that he would agree with you, and that we have this kind of strip mall mentality, thank you, Mike, and rampant development because we didn't have foresight, we didn't have vision, we didn't know what we wanted, and we still don't know what we want, but maybe now if we could come together, well, if you know what you want, but how do you know you're going to get it? How do you know you're going to get what you want? No, you don't know someone's going to come into your community and maybe the local zoning, you know, allows for some development to occur that you don't like. This happens all the time across Long Island. So I think part of this process, let me just finish, let me just be clear. I think that, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, part of this process is try to get everyone together with diverse perspectives and see if we can reach a consensus on what it is we do want. And maybe we can't do that. But I think the process is about trying to do that so that we don't have what we had, which is just development anywhere and everywhere with no real thought or vision about how it's going to look in the end. And I think that's what it's more about than anything else.
That's right.
There also was a comment about taking people's property rights. That's not what the program's about. It's about placing a value on those rights so that a farmer, for instance, gets a value for his land, and he maintains the right to farm that land. He's foregoing the right to put many homes, condos, etc., on that vast open farmland in place so that a developer can take those that ability to build and put that in a downtown. That's what this program and the dialogue was really about.
This is like carbon trading.
It's not.
Right.
It's not at all. It's not at all.
It's the same premise, isn't it? It's the same premise. Wait, I have a question.
Somebody's before you. Plenty of people before you.
Little history of me. I grew up. Excuse me. I grew up in Glenhead, Nassau County. And when I became a teenager, had a little bit of brain, not a lot, I realized that I couldn't afford to live in Nassau County. So the reality was, you go to someplace where you can afford. That's right. I wound up in Lake Grove. I realize now that a lot of people in Suffolk County are in the same boat I was in. And boo-hoo if you have to move out of state to afford a place to live. Correct. Don't tell me I have to part with my land or put 4 families in my house. I don't know where this is going. But anyway, that's a little bit of reality. If you can't afford it here, you move away. That's right. And to me, it's a simple thing, but I could be wrong. Now,
can I interject? That's absolutely right. Anybody should have the right to move out of state.
Anywhere they want.
But what if, just believe me for a second.
I believe you. Anything you say, I believe completely.
There are businesses talking to me that are looking at many different areas to move to, and they want a place where young professionals can afford to live and want to live. So you can say, move if you want to move. It's going to hurt our business competitiveness. And it's not me talking. These are big businesses that need to move to places where their workers, their young professionals, want to live.
I think to answer your statement, maybe they could move into Grumman's and Calverton. There's a big area there where they can build on. But that's a whole lot. Can I go on? May I go on with something else? May I go on with something else? The letters ICLEI was brought up, and there's nothing to do with the consortium. But on your handout, it says an advisory board beneath New Jersey Transportation Planning Authority and above local initiatives support corporation is ICLEI, local governments for sustainability. It says sustainability. What is sustainability? Evidently, it's a typo. Could you? Can someone explain who and what is ICLEI? You don't want to know. Oh, I do want to know, and I hope you do know. And does it have anything to do with Agenda 21? It does. Yes, it does. Could someone please answer completely? Who are they, and why are they on the advisory board?
Let me answer the original question, and then Chris, can you describe Higley? I think you all know who they are anyway. They are on the advisory board. They're not a member of the consortium, which is what I said.
We don't want them advising.
Higley is a nonprofit that advises local governments on energy efficiency and sustainability plans. Advisory in nature, they have, they're on the advisory board of this, as are several other, as are several other nonprofit organizations.
This gentleman asked a question. He's trying to answer.
As are state agencies. I mean, I'm obviously not going to dissuade you that they're somehow in the back of the bus driving this. All I can tell you is that it is absolutely not true. They are one of many members of this partnership. They have a voice in it, as do several others.
Follow up to that?
This guy's been waiting. He's spoken a couple of times already.
Chris? Okay.
Let this gentleman.
One thing
several things struck my mind with your initial slide presentation, but one thing that really stood out, and I think I'm quoting, more regulation is a gauge of success. Yes.
It was in the slide.
If you go to about a third of the way into your slide presentation, okay, it was something to the effect of that more regulation was a gauge of success. Now, Mr. Kelly,
well, go back.
Who do you represent?
There you go.
Okay, house builders.
Home builders, correct.
Home builders, okay. You have to know how regulation that's going to be coming down the pike is going to add to the cost of a home. Yes or no? Big time. And especially stuff that's coming down from the EPA, okay, as far as the paint that you can take off a wall, how you have to handle it. So now our goal is to reduce, young fellow back there, have a tremendous amount of respect for what you're trying to accomplish, okay? I have a young son your age, and he saved up enough money to put a deposit on a house. If you really look at real estate now, you can find deals for under $200,000, not $400,000. So just do your research and save your money. It's doable, and you don't need to ask everybody to reach into their pocket for you to achieve your goal. But anyway, that's on the side. Okay, so now when measure success, the number of code amendments and design standards opted. There you go, Mr. Kelly. Are you looking at that? There you go. This is going to add to the cost of housing on Long Island. Okay? And this Agenda 21, which is coming down the pike, whether you are aware or you don't want to admit it, it has the potential. You need to pay attention too, because you obviously don't know anything about this, okay? Okay, it has the potential where, let's say we want to sell our homes. Young fella in the back, you own a home now, okay? You've had it for 10 years, you want to upgrade. You bought a 2-bedroom house to start, and now you got a family, you want to sell it, you want to buy another house. What Agenda 21 has the potential to do for the government to step in and now say to you, you cannot sell your house until you replace all the windows with triple pane glass, put 16 inches of insulation, okay? You better not have any kind of paint that does not conform with EPA standards. So before you even put your house on the market for sale, okay, this what's coming down the pike, and they don't even realize it, and that's the sad thing, okay, because they got a grant for how much money? $300 million. Okay, that was not paid for.
$3.5 million.
Right, that was not paid for, okay, it's owed money that we don't have, okay, and so you're all jumping on this bandwagon. Okay, so there's the potential for that house that you want to sell, the government stepping in and saying, you can't sell it until you do all these things. Right. Okay? Everybody understand where we are with this?
Obamacare is going to take 3%.
No, I'm assuming that you're referring to this slide here. Is that the one? Okay. First of all, just the sense of we're for more regulations. That's not what we're for. We're for the right regulations. Some regulations need to be. Some regulations. Well, it's not my opinion. It's no one else. It comes out of a conversation. It comes out of a dialogue. It comes out of different perspectives weighing in on what works. This particular slide refers to, first of all, it's a study that's being done by New York City, so they're talking about New York City codes in this sense. And it's looking at how can we protect subway infrastructure, road infrastructure, new construction from increased flooding that is predicted to take place. So it's looking at a very specific slice to have a public good. That's what it's about. It's the New York City Panel for Climate Change that did the study. It's supported by several others.
Okay. Now,
yes, be happy to look at it.
This was in the Wall Street Journal, and this isn't the first series of articles, but this was a piece 2 days ago signed by 17 prominent climate scientists that are not on board with this whole bogus global, we used to call it global warming, but that fell out of favor. Now we call it climate change, okay? And dissenting scientists were basically told, you better keep your mouth shut, okay? And I've only made a couple of copies. I'd like to give one to that gentleman, and there's another copy here. Maybe we'll give it to the environmentalist, okay, so she can look at it too. Feel free to pass it around, okay?
Jerry, there's some folks in the back, I think, that wanted to...
No, this gentleman has been very patient.
I've got to grab a few from that field.
I'd like to say something about this global warming thing now that it's up again. If you go on the computer and you just put in 3 keywords, East Anglia,
there you go.
Amen. That'll give you the whole story. It will debunk the whole global warming story. It came out in the spring of 2009, and not one word of it has been in any of the press. Second of all, how much land is there in the United States that is undeveloped?
99% of it.
How much?
90%.
Okay, there's plenty of land out there. You don't have to cram 300 million people into 10% of the land. Let people choose to live where they want to live. Trying to cram us into one little spot. There's plenty of land out there.
I'm just saying, I think...
Folks, we have time for a couple of more. I want to go back here, folks, and I'll get to you, sir, if you give me a second.
Thank you. My name is Chris. I'm going to make 3 separate points. ICLEI is mentioned on two separate sources on the literature that was handed out.
We got that idea.
Where'd you get the blueprint?
In a very broad sense, what I'm hearing discussed tonight here reminds me of where my husband came from. A communist country where his family farm was confiscated. This is family farmland that had been in the family for several generations, courtesy of the communists. They confiscated the land, and then they charged them to grow crops on it. What we're seeing tonight is a gargantuan Trojan horse, and that is Agenda 21. I thank you very much, sir, for bringing up the most elegant, beautiful, and profound document that tells us what our rights are. We need to be reminded of this. This will not happen on my watch. It will not happen.
Good evening. I want to put a little insight onto a few items that have been coming up here. Number one, whether we're talking about sustainable communities or we're talking about sustainable development, they're all aspects of Agenda 21. In order for you to get a developer to feel it's economically viable for him to get involved, and I'm not talking about what you guys were mentioning, which is the undeveloped land which you can use trading rights for in order to keep land open and to keep water from being contaminated. I'm addressing the other issue that you brought up, which is the main goal of forcing people to live around transportation hubs. The idea of only building on the so-called open parking, which you just started us off with this evening, there is no way that a developer would consider that, even with high-rise. Even if you went to 20-story buildings, which I doubt you'll do, you'll probably do 7 or 8 with a lot of type of, not condos necessarily, but townhouses. What about the people who live 4 miles, 5 miles, 10 miles, without them being able to, how would they be able to survive as individual homeowners if the goal is to get everybody to live around a hub? What you really have to do in time, and if you read through the sustainable development that comes from Agenda 21, the goal is to have different zones. Small, compact zones with mixed-use housing for business and residential around transportation hubs. As the gentleman over there said, cram 300 million people into a transportation corridor along the East Coast, and then the other 90% would be for wilderness and reintroducing of wild animals and closing down roads and having a situation where people are going to live only in transportation hubs. So therefore, what you really are talking about, although nobody's addressing this, is that one of the goals of this whole Agenda 21 sustainable development is to step-by-step abolish private property rights through zoning changes. And I submit the following. If you are going to force people to give up their property rights, which is very un-American, sounds more communistic than anything else, which is the whole world organization, one world government under the UN dictating what the rest of the world can do for social justice and economic justice. What I submit is that you guys eventually, if you get your way and your blueprint goes into fruition, you are going to either negatively economically nudge people to not be able to afford their houses anymore, or you are going to use unrestrained eminent domain, or you are going to use outright confiscation on the grounds that it is necessary for society to have your agenda put in place. Totally un-American. We can see through what you guys are doing. If you are not enlightened to what's really going on, and you're the front man for something you don't understand, I urge you to get involved. There's a meeting on the 24th of February at the Plainview Library, 999 Old Country Road.
7 p.m.
7 p.m. I urge all of you gentlemen and ladies to be there. I think you will have an eye-opening experience as to what really awaits us if we go down the road you are leading the Pied Piper to make us follow you on. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
We handed out this thing called the New York Connecticut Sustainable Communities Planning Program, draft overarching, whatever that means, goals and major milestones. Who's actually going to do the studies? Who's going to pay for it? Who's going to? What's the purpose? I mean, it's all paperwork so far, and what is the actual? Why are they doing it?
There was one slide up earlier that showed that there were regional activities and a series of place-based and area-wide studies, looks, and so forth. Those will all be done by the members of the consortium, which were described. 2 counties, 9 cities, including New York City, 5 metropolitan planning organizations, and so forth. They're the ones who are actually doing the study. Their principals, the people who, the mayors and so forth, and the county executives and so forth, form the steering committee for this particular process and program.
So the 5 points here?
The 5 points were put together as an overarching framework for the planning program. We're getting feedback, we get a lot of it tonight, on these particular goals and objectives. And then the steering committee has to get back together and make changes.
And how do people put input in?
Well, if you could want to write something down and hand it to me, that's one way. You've given it verbally tonight. All these ways are open. You can go through the website too.
Website, okay.
Okay.
What responsibility are you going to take and commit to make sure that the civics, those that are guiding their communities, are informed? I know of at least 10 civic leaders in here that found out about this tonight, less than 24 hours ago. I think you have a moral responsibility where, number one, you have failed, but you need to pick up your pace and make sure that you do, as Eric Alexander said in 2006, address the NIMBY factor, because NIMBY is who has the best interest on this land, this property, and preserving it as it should be. We are good stewards of our responsibility God gave us. Please don't tamper with that. Live up to your responsibility to us. We pay you.
We are using these initial town halls to do just what you said, which is to find out about other people who are interested and to draw them in. That's exactly what we're doing. So we're also using the members of the consortium and the groups that they know as a starting point. So this is a starting point.
Yeah, what a shock.
I want to ask, how would somebody who didn't have a computer or didn't know to go on the website to look for this, how would the average regular person know that this meeting was taking place tonight so that they'd have an opportunity to be here and have their voices heard? How else was this meeting publicized besides just on the website?
It wasn't just on the website.
But how else was it published? Okay.
There was email used, but there was also, as far as I know, mail used to advertise this, and it was based on a list that we compiled from all of our different data banks. And it's not perfect. I'm sorry?
Your email list of your people.
We are all government.
Private citizens in the community
We
communities
understand.
themselves that it's actually going to impact?
We understand.
And how will they notify those people that this
What
is
was
going
that?
on?
What's the
If enough people, if enough
No,
people
what?
do not want what you say, are you going to go away? No. They're not going away.
This is a planning process.
That's right.
You
They ain't
affect,
going nowhere.
can I finish? You affect the people who are going to be making ultimate decisions on these things.
We have to get the word
Who are the elected officials.
They've been added since '78. I think they're going away now.
We have 2 minutes.
He told me to stand up. No, I didn't necessarily want to stand up. He just told me to stand up. I'll tell you exactly how ICLEI is involved, okay, and with your partners. I don't know if the town of Huntington, the town of Babylon, the town of Brookhaven, or the village of Southampton is involved in any way whatsoever, but they are all members of ICLEI. They've all signed on, and they all said they would follow the Kyoto Agreement. That is a fact. So is West Hempstead. You can go to their site, look up their members, and you can see that they are members, and they have all signed on. So if you think Agenda 21 doesn't factor into that, please check it out, because believe me, I've been researching this till my head wants to explode. Just one other thing is that, part of Agenda 21 is, it was started by a guy called Maurice Strong. He was the co-author of it. And in there, private property rights and single-family homes are unsustainable. That's their words, and that's their whole point of this.
Agenda.
So you got to be real careful, but please go and search the ICLEI site. Please look up the members. You'll know that I am telling the truth, and that's how it ties into what's happening with you.
Just in terms of outreach and getting everybody involved here, we'll take responsibility for not getting the word out to everybody that should have. And this is this is part of a building process where everybody who's here is going to get on a mailing list. It will start to go out. Any suggestions for physical mailing lists that we should have, we'll follow up on this.
Write our names and what we do for a job just to get a ticket to come here tonight.
Is that intimidation? I mean, what's this going to turn into?
No. I'd take a completely different approach if you don't mind. Perhaps public square, like when you want to do anything, you have to get out there and you have to make a public notice. I think that might be a better way than going to your own personal email lists.
These suggestions are very helpful. That's the first thing we want to do. Jerry, I think it's about 9 o'clock.
Just one quick question. We're all accepting this premise. Why can't we return the money, reduce the deficit, and all go home and go about our business? Why are we going on the premise that we even have to carry forward with this?
Well, I mean, first of all, we've had several of these town halls, and we've actually heard from some people who want us to do this. So you're not in the majority. So we're hearing from both sides.
That's because you've been...
We're hearing from both sides.
$15 trillion in debt. You want to spend another couple of $100 million. We're broke.
I'm just trying to address this man's question, okay? Here are some of the themes I've heard tonight. Here are some of the themes I've heard tonight, trying to listen to what you've all been telling us.
All right, let him finish. Come on.
There are, you feel that there are different definitions of affordability, and that's an issue in terms of what you regard as affordability, okay? That was loud and clear. There are a number of points you raised with private property rights, including misuse of eminent domain, taking a private property by eminent domain. I'm reading my own notes here, sorry. Zoning often reflects residents' values. You told us that. Planned unit development, someone raised an issue with that. In terms of, well, the sewering that you raised, the processing of the sewering was a specific issue, but then the issue of sewering came up several times. One woman doesn't want to hear the term again, okay? But the issue of sewering in terms of its impact on development on Long Island, several people brought up. Ownership of private property is important. Revitalization, there were issues of what you define and what anyone defines as revitalization or whether it's even needed. Density is an issue that was brought up several times, the idea of density not being preferred. And
Individual rights.
Individual rights came up many, many times. Climate concerns, obviously you raised issues with the climate concerns.
How about the necessity, period, of why this is starting?
Yeah, well,
Why is there any more building, period, on Long Island? We live on a
No, I
finite...
can agree with that totally.
Well, I know you can, and I was told not to say that. Because I was going to agree with you. You're 10% right, 10%, 10%, but as a whole, you people are very bad. And you don't know that. Now, the necessity of doing this, we have buildings that are empty. We have homes going into foreclosure.
and we have people leaving the island in
We have
droves.
people that have multiple residents now as an apartment, it's a subsidy apartment, whatever they call it. They've been doing that for years to sustain the taxes. New York, Long Island, there's no business here because of the tax rate. And you're not going to change the tax rate because you're going to stack and pack people. They're not going to pay their fair proportionment of taxes. It's going to be pushed on to what's left of the single-family homeowners in $100 to $200 increments.
We'll put that on the list.
Yes, do that.
And then the last thing that was obviously the concept of sustainability. And there's a great deal of concern about that whole concept and what it means.
It's not sustainable.
I'm just talking about the concept of sustainability. You know, I mean, several people offered their own definitions of that. And
Long Island will fix itself.
That's right.
I have it here. Would you like to read what they're going to discuss?
No.
You ought to learn something.
I'll be happy to read whatever you'd like me to read. Okay? So we certainly...
All right, let him wrap it up.
Because they need the values down.
Okay, thank you. What I wanted to point out is I wanted to say thank you for being honest. Okay, that's very, very important to this entire process. And we appreciate the time you spent here tonight. Everything you've said was heard.
We needed to add one point. This is the kind of central planning of a failed Soviet empire.
Yes. Yes.
And on that note, good night, everyone.